I know that this race is one that you are running against an opponent that you also faced last year. So
It's a
I know
rematch.
it's a rematch in your words. So what
Yeah.
does that mean for you? Does that affect how you're running your campaign at all?
Well, it's actually literally a rematch. There were 6 candidates running. 5 of them are now supporting me, and 1 is supporting my opponent. So my opponent stands alone. All the other candidates from 2014, including myself, are supporting my reelection.
And do you think, I mean, is there anything about his campaign that you think he is tapping into a segment of your district that you have not?
Actually, I don't. I think his message is mostly that because I'm a fiscal conservative and I'm in the minority on council, I really only have consistent support from Councilmember Ellen Troxclair when it comes to curtailing the spending and opposing some of the crazy ordinances of the majority, like the TNC ordinance that chased out Uber and Lyft. So I think he's running on really a campaign that we need to make the 10-1 council look like the old downtown 7-0 council. That seems to be his major theme.
And you just pointed something out that we do see in many council votes. You and Councilmember Troxclair on one side, other council members on another side. I mean, this has happened multiple times. So why do you think it is so important to have a different voice on that council?
Well, I would say to my political adversaries, they have been lecturing our city for decades about the importance for diversity. Now that we finally have some political diversity, they want to squash it out and they want to silence the voice of reason that disagrees with the progressive agenda that's been dominating the city for decades. So obviously I think it's disingenuous, and I have a lot of support around this city. In fact, my new 4x8 campaign slogan on my big signs, it says the taxpayer's voice of reason. We got that slogan from numerous emails from people all around the city who would say, I'm a Democrat, obviously don't believe in all your views, but you are the voice of reason. You need to stay on council.
And as you look to your opponent, I mean, you now have had time under this new 10-1 council. Is there anything that you know now that you didn't know then that any new council member might be stepping into? I'm wondering what surprised you about your experience so far.
I really haven't had any surprises. I ran on a campaign of changing city management, starting with our incumbent city manager. I campaigned heavily on that in 2014, but I did not know, and I could not have known, the unbelievable dominance of power of the unelected bureaucracy. You know, I'm fine with a weak city council. I'd like to match that with a weak city bureaucracy, but that is not what we have. In my view, we have a really incredibly powerful and unaccountable city bureaucracy, and we have an impotent elected city council. And to give you one example of that out of many was the recent police body camera contract that is now in court. But the police department has resisted all of my efforts as chairman of the Public Safety Committee to even have council involved really in the discussion. And we've got a video we put up, a video clip, where back in May of this year, we had tried for a year to get APD to work with us on the policy for this new video camera data and how it would be released. And the APD told us, no, the policy has already been determined and it has already been implemented within the department.
So
And
this is
one of my
something you've
council
seen.
colleagues seemed absolutely stunned at that notion, but I'd been telling council for a year, you know, being on the Public Safety Committee, that APD doesn't solicit nor do they care about what the council says on policy. They implement it all themselves.
And as we're talking about different policies, obviously two very big conversations: affordability, transportation. Let's start with affordability. And what do you want to tell your district constituents who will be voting when it comes to how you will make things a little bit easier for them in that regard?
Well, let's start with the fact that we live in a very beautiful place. We have higher elevation here, pretty hill country, highland lakes. People are attracted to this area because it's one of the prettiest places in Texas. One of the craziest things the city government does is subsidize development. My opponent back in 2012, when he was chairman of the Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, came down to council and lobbied in favor of the Apple computer corporate subsidies. Crazy. We do not need to pay anyone to come here. We don't have a problem with lack of jobs and growth. In fact, we have too much growth too rapidly, and the city bureaucracy contributes to that by forcing us to subsidize companies. The other huge problem are city ordinances, which are completely out of control. We have had developers who have left the Austin market because as the Zucker report pointed out, we have some of the worst bureaucracy in the country when it comes to site development and review and permitting. It's off the charts terrible. We also have a lot of conflicting ordinances and land use, centralized planning and control that makes it completely unaffordable to build market affordable housing. You know, if you look at a place like Houston, Texas that does not have centralized planning and zoning and bureaucracy, they have deed restriction model is what they use. They have a better mix of upper and lower income housing all around the city because they don't have centralized planning and bureaucrats. So they're better able to respond to the market. And the final point I want to say is the city is engaged in an outrageous practice of institutionalizing economic segregation. Back in the 20s and 30s, they implemented racial segregation. Now they're implementing economic segregation. And they're forcing us to pay higher taxes to subsidize a few people in subsidized housing. That is unaffordable and it's unsustainable and it's making the problems worse.
And now the other big headache question, the answer depends on who you ask, how to address our severe transportation issues. I know that we have a mobility bond coming up here shortly. I mean, beyond that, what do you think needs to happen? What answers do you have and do you think the council needs to consider?
Well, after I've served on city council for these 21 months, it's become very, very obvious to me that the agenda for not building roads comes from the unelected city bureaucracy. There is a political agenda to not build roads and to use the traffic congestion as a social engineering tool to get you to move into a dense development somewhere. If it's downtown or the Domain, get you riding a train or an empty bus or something. They are using traffic congestion as a social engineering tool. We have 11 plans right now on the city website. We have a plan for bicycles. We have a plan for sidewalks, parks, and urban trails. We even have a plan for the climate, like we can do something about it. But we have no plan for traffic congestion relief. And that's a problem that the city has been contributing to for decades. For example, Austin is the only reasonably sized city in Texas that doesn't have one expressway loop around the city. A rational city like San Antonio or Houston or Dallas has 2 or maybe 3 loops around it, and Austin does not have one. So the source of the congestion problems here are the Austin city bureaucrats.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Zimmerman. We really appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me. Thank